Hey, we're here with somebody who's now become a friend of mine, only because I think he's works out of the gym more than I do. Anthony, for people who don't know you or don't know your great company, give us an introduction.
Well, great to have be here, Lester. I'm Anthony Masotto. I'm the GM and Executive Vice President of Drexi, and we are a transparent pass-through PBM, full service PBM, by the way, too. So again, when you think about all the things that PBMs do, we own our network, we adjudicate all of our claims, we do all the clinical work, and we do all of those things with no conflicts, right? So Drexi was started in 2013 on the basis of, hey, let's change the status quo. And how do we do that? And essentially, we don't own product, we don't prefer product, and we don't dispense any product. And we don't make money on drugs, right? So we're able to sit on the same side of the table as the consultant and the employer to look at what is the best thing that we can do, and that is to drive down costs, get to the same clinical outcome while protecting the plan and the member financially, right? That's why we are here, and that's why we exist.
So, pass through this, that, yeah, it seems like a lot of people are using those terms. So, when we dig out into the actual solution, like what is it when you think about the value proposition of a PBM and the things that they do? Break that down into where is that value creation really stored?
Yeah. So again, I mean, the number one thing is access to data, right? And without access to data, you're kind of in the dark, right? So, you look at some of the recent events that have happened, just in the last few months around some of the lawsuits, Johnson & Johnson and Wells Fargo, and, how they're manipulating drug costs and those kinds of things. With us, right? When we buy drugs, when we fill medications, we're not manipulating the data to drive more money to our shareholders or our private equity, because that's not what we're in business to do, right? We're here to bring value as a partner, right? And show you the best way to acquire medications. So whatever we buy the drugs for, that's what we sell them for, right? And that's the biggest issue within the pharmacy space today is nobody knows what anybody's buying them for, and nobody knows what they're actually, well, they know what they're selling them for, but if you don't have both sides of the sale, buy and sell side, you really don't know how much you're paying these entities to drive, to administer your benefits, right? So that in itself creates that transparency, right? It's like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is how we help, and this is the value that we bring to you.
So, Anthony, so if we're thinking of like, hey, education, a question that somebody needs to ask is question number one: how and how much am I paying you, Mr. PBM, or on behalf of their client? How am I paying and how much am I paying a PBM?
Correct. Right. And that's really hard to get to.
So, okay, so we got transparency, we got the ability to do that. And quite honestly, there's a lot of things that fall under that. You talked about we own our own networks and tech and all of those things. One that I think people don't really understand the value of is the formulary and the ability to, manipulate that. We're so used and conditioned in this business. What is the formulary and how much disruption it's going to be? Talk to me about the formulary and the value of controlling that.
Sure. So the way that we operate, we actually work off of an open formulary, right? So most entities out there today work off of a preferred, non-preferred type formulary. And when you're operating in that, you're actually driving people to higher cost of goods, right? So they can make more money. They can, and a great example of that would be insulin, right? Think about insulin for a second. So Eli Lilly makes Humalog, Novo Nordisk makes Novolog, the two brand insulin, major manufacturers of insulin. The big guys, right, they're going to prefer, and we'll pick on Eli Lilly for a second, they're going to prefer Humalog, and they're going to non-prefer what they call Insulin Lispro. Insulin Lispro and Humalog are a bioidentical drug made on the exact same production line. The difference though in cost is huge, right? We can treat the same diabetic for $100 as you're treating them for $1,000 today, right? But the only reason why you get navigated to the Humalog, the preferred drug within the formulary, is one, because they make more money on rebates, right? At the end of the day. So that is just one example of how you manage the formulary. So we manage it on an open formulary. So we manage it through step therapy, prior authorizations, and high-cost drug edits, right? Because there is a time and a place that certain people need certain drugs, right? So I don't need to guide them to a higher cost of goods if they don't need the higher cost of goods, right? So at the end of the day, the way that we manage our formulary is generic first. So our block of business runs at a 92% generic dispensing rate, right? If you look in the ecosystem today, on average, it's around 85, right? So you have a gap there if you can start driving stuff there. And then outside of that, I know later we're going to start talking about specialty and high cost brand management. And again, by having this open formulary, I also don't get restricted by pharma around rebates, right? Because if I don't prefer non-preferred drugs, right, again, it creates an issue as you start when we submit for rebates, right? We don't chase the rebates. So when there is one out there, we want to make sure we give it to back to the employer and the plan, and we want to maximize as much as we can. But that's a losing battle if you think because you're going to a higher cost of goods, you're going to get more rebate, but that's because the drugs cost more, hence the reason why there's more rebate dollars there. But at the end of the day, it's a lose-lose situation for you.
So, in that scenario, I guess, again, question number two, hey, can I control my formulary? And if the answer is no, the only reason somebody is saying that is because there is an economic advantage for them as the PBM in they've generated their formulary and therefore their economics are tied to that. They want to keep that going on. When we think about those expensive drugs that are driving the biggest dollar amounts, there's several tactics to really attack the big cost drugs. Talk to me about those and how you guys approach those.
Sure. So once we deem a drug clinically appropriate, right, we actually we pen the claim, right, and we look at what arrows do we have in our quiver, right, to drive those costs down, right? So you think about all the programs that are available within the ecosystem today, right? You have copay cards, you have patient assistance programs, you have foundations, you have international drug sourcing, you have 340B options, right? So once we kind of, like I said, the drug, hey, we're going to have, this is going to be this drug for this person. Then what we do is we proactively do an outreach to the member, right? And then we start kind of going through what we call knockout questions, right? And based on the answers to those questions, we'll determine what direction we can go, right? So patient assistance, manufacturer savings programs, that's all income-based, right? So if you're the CEO, you make $500,000 a year, you're not going to get that drug for free, right? So, okay, what's next in line, right? So let's say we have the ability to source drugs international, right? Okay, that would be the next step, right? Is that drug available? If it is, we can source it for a fraction of the cost that you can buy it here in the US. And most people don't realize that the drugs aren't even made here, right? Johnson & Johnson makes all their drugs in the Netherlands. AbbVie makes their drugs in Puerto Rico, in Germany and wherever, right? And then they ship them everywhere. So when I say I'm buying a drug from a specialty pharmacy in Canada, it's the same drug in the same box with the maple leaf on it and instead of a US flag. And instead of $25,000, I spend $7,000, right? Not a rebate in the world that's going to make up that differential. But let's say for whatever reason, we can't pull on that lever, right? The group doesn't want to do international. That's okay. Because there's another program. There's a 340B program. Again, federal program. You kind of navigate members into what they call a covered entity. They write in the script. And then you still get a significant savings in that bucket. But let's say the drug isn't available. There's none of those options available. And we have to keep it US side. So what we then do is we take a really different approach is we put it to bid. So we don't have an exclusive specialty pharmacy. So we have a network, what we call a PSAO of specialty pharmacies. And so when we put it to bid, whoever has the lowest price gets to dispense the med. And then that way we can keep downward pressure on price. Because again, that exclusivity, if we had exclusivity, as you know, they might give me really good deals on some, and others they're not going to give me a good deal on. And in the way that we do it, guess what? I can get the best deal on all of them, essentially, right? So that's kind of how we approach that.
So, third question. Hey, PBM, how are you helping me manage my specialty and high cost drugs? And it needs to be a series of these programs that I think I heard you say, like the member gets such an advantage too, because they're getting that medication for free and the plan is saving. So, again, a huge advantage. When we think about that overall strategic approach, so hey, we're not one of the big boys, we are more niche, more nimble, we were created on the backs of transparency anyway. Talk to me about the value creation for, let's talk about the three constituencies: the employer, their employee, and the advisor community out there. So let's go employer. What's in it for the employer?
Well, the employer, if you look over the last, 10, 15 years, what they've had to do to their own employee population just to stay afloat, right? Deductibles keep going up, max out of pockets keep going up. They have to limit sometimes the benefits that they're giving their employees, right? So because their costs continue to rise 15, 20% year over year over year, on an expense that's second in line to payroll, right? So at the end of the day, they want to give their employees the best benefits, right? It attracts a better pool of employees. These drugs, granted, yes, they are expensive, but yes, some of these drugs are life-changing drugs, which again, get employees to work more often, healthy, happy, all of these things. But then on the last piece of it is you can do all of those things for half the cost, 40% less than you're doing it today, which again, think about all those, that extra dollars that are driving to the bottom line. What would that take from a sales perspective? How many more widgets would you have to sell if I came to you and said, I'm going to cut your RX in half, right? You're spending $2 million a day. Next year, you're going to spend $1 million. So again, from the employer side, it's a win-win across the board, right? Again, you get to give these people a really rich benefit, right? We're going the other way now, right? I'm not raising deductibles. I'm saying, hey, you give it to them for free now, right? So from that perspective, it's great. Now, from the employee side, right? I'm an employee. I want to make sure my family and myself have the best benefits possible. God forbid something happens, or I'm going through something today. I have a sickness or an illness or whatever it may be. If you look about, the average family cost for health insurance these days, $24,000, $25,000 a year. And if you're a blue collar worker, you know this as much as anybody else. The number one reason for people going bankrupt in the US is healthcare costs, right? So again, that's one piece of it. And then the other piece is if they can't afford it, then they don't get the help at all, right? And what does that do to the overall health of the population of the employer plan? So there's that piece, right? And then, so again, we're talking about happy employers, happy employees. Now they can get the care that they need for a fraction of the cost, a lot of times, for free, right? The way that we're building all these different plans. And then from the broker perspective, walking into an entity with this sort of solution, they look like the hero, right? They're Superman with the cape. Look at all these things that we can do. And that creates a huge amount of value and stickiness and, consultativeness, right? That we're coming together, we're creating these plans, thinking outside the box, and that employer will now be a lifetime partner of theirs, because again, they've done so many different things and brought in so many different unique solutions that employers are looking for today, and employees are looking for today. So, again, so you kind of hit all three in the approach of, hey, there's a better way to do this. Let's think outside the box. Let's think of, get outside of the traditional ASO, BUCA, bundled, all these different things. And let's really start creating, a value-based system that, and a healthy population is really what we're trying to get to.
And I think one of the most underrated things that people don't realize, and I realize this because it's been our mission, right, is you also put your head down on the pillow at night a lot better, knowing that you are making an impact in people's lives. Like, that might sound cheesy, but every day you put a plan together, that there are going to be people that literally either would be financially ruined or their health would be impacted because they can't afford it if they didn't have your solution. And by golly, that is a really good feeling when you go to bed at night.
1000%.
So I want to end this with a case study. So we've talked about the whys, the hows, we've talked about the widgets. What does this really look like in practicality? Walk me through an employer scenario.
Sure. And I have a great one. So on January 1st of this year, we took a pharmaceutical repackaging company, right? So you think about pharma sends the drugs into the US, this entity repackages them to distribute them to all the pharmacies and things like that, right? So they took on these solutions, right? They took on the international drug solutions. They took on the patient assistance solutions, and it kind of fits into two buckets here real quick. So this entity had a hemophiliac on the plan, right? So we took it from Optum. Optum in the month of December of 2023 charged the group $75,000 for the hemophiliac, right? Hemophiliacs don't really have any other solutions. There's no really patient assistance. There's no international drug sourcing. It was just purely going back to once we deem a drug clinically appropriate, we put it to bid. Well, that drug went to our specialty pharmacy that deals with hemophilia. On the very next fill in January, that claim went from $75,000 to $40,000 overnight. So that group, just on that one drug, just moving from one pharmacy to another, just saved $360,000 on their hemophiliac, right? Then there was another one. They had a high cost medication that was costing the plan $25,000 a month. Again, there was this employer was was not making a lot of money. They were going to we could put the application in them to get the drug for free through pharma. They also had what they called a bridge program. So that means while they were going through the application process, member didn't have to go out their med, right? Pharma's going to give it to them as they're evaluating the assistance. Come to find out, 6 weeks later, they got approved for the medication. There was another $250,000 drug. So think about that. We saved the group damn near $700,000 on 2 drugs. That's it. So the president calls us after the second one and goes, is there anything else you can do? Because this is wild. Like, we never knew that you could do this kind of stuff. And we package drugs for pharma. So again, right, you think about that. And we didn't, and now we're doing the international for them. Because again, they know, right? Hey, we repackage it. They get shipped all over the place. It's the same drug in the same box with the maple leaf on instead of a US flag. But instead of, again, it's a 60, 70% less. Because we've eliminated, or again, by doing that, you eliminate all the money, everybody's hand in the pot, hence the reason why pharma has to charge so much. And here's a really funny story about that. Pharma, a lot of times, makes less profit in the US than they do in other parts of the world because of all the money they got to give back and everybody grabbing dollars, dollars and tens and thousands of dollars at a time.
It's such a frustrating system. I mean, it's amazing to know that, companies like yours and people like you are out there. It's sad to know that that's only like, a couple percentage of the marketplace. It gives us optimistic that we're on the right track and this is going to be huge, but man, it is a road. So I want to end with that. The number one thing you would tell the audience on it when it comes to their prescription drug program, what's the number one thing you would leave people with?
You don't have to stay with the status quo. Right? There is another solution out there to, to one, drive more value, to cut cost, to make happier employees. And at the end of the day, right, we're all in this together, right? So knowing that you have somebody or a pharmacy or a PBM like myself, and consultants out there that we all work together, that we're actively trying to find solutions day in and day out to, again, get us to low net costs and bring as much value as we possibly can to them and their employees every day.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Anthony, thanks for spending time with us, man. I look forward to seeing what's next in the journey, because I've seen you guys go from this to this to this. So it's exciting. And again, thanks for what you do.